The night we buried Dad, a man chained our gate and called it legal. The chain scraped the iron like a bad song. It was almost dark in the Willamette Valley. The last cars from the funeral had rolled away. I was still in my suit, holding Dad's hat, when a process server stepped from a dusty sedan and taped a notice to the post. He didn't meet my eyes. He just cleared his throat and said, "Caretaker deed. Effective now." Then he left the chain, clicked a lock, and drove off. I walked closer and read the notice. The parcel number was circled in red. It made my stomach twist because that number was not ours. It belonged to the neighbor's strip by the creek. I looked up and saw a small trick. The private drive sign had been moved 6 feet and screwed into a different post. From far away, it made our lane look like the neighbor's. Mom, Elaine, stood beside me with her sweater wrapped tight. "What is it, Noah?" she asked. "Just paper," I said. I kept my voice calm for her. Liam, my older brother, stood across the gravel with his hands in his pockets and a look that said he enjoyed this. Uncle Ron leaned on the hood of his blue F-150 and smiled like he owned the sunset. I took out my phone and snapped the county notice, the wrong parcel number, and a quick shot of the old bolt holes where the sign used to be. I set it clear for my own record and for the camera on my dash. Operation Harvest Back, Phase 1 starts now. I pocketed Dad's hat, breathed in the cold and the oak and the wet soil, and told myself not to shout. Receipts over rage, that was the rule. After everyone left, Mom made tea. Her hands shook as she poured. The house smelled like smoke from the fireplace and lilies from the funeral. She looked smaller than she had that morning. "Your father kept something for storms," she said, sliding a tiny key across the table. It hung on a tag from First Cascade Bank. "He told me to give this to you if things ever felt wrong." I rolled the tag between my fingers. Box 117th. Liam watched from the doorway, pretending he wasn't listening. "You don't need to bother," he said. "I already checked the box. It was empty." He lifted his chin. "Dad told me to handle things." Mom's eyes flickered to me. I kept my face still. "Which branch?" I asked. "Town," he said. "Too fast. Main Street." "Dad moved banks last year after the merger," Mom said softly. Liam looked at the floor, then forced a laugh. "Whatever. It's empty anyway." I opened Dad's desk and pulled a thin folder with old deposit slips. At the bottom was a slip with a new branch name and a date from last fall. I placed it next to the key tag. Liam's throat moved. Sweat gathered at his hairline. I felt anger jump in me, but I kept it low. "I'll go in the morning," I said. "You won't find anything," Liam said, louder now, "because there isn't anything." I walked him to the porch. The chain was still on the gate. The notice fluttered in the wind. "If you're so sure," I said, "why are you sweating?" He didn't answer. Behind him, the blue F-150 idled at the edge of the lane. Uncle Ron lifted 2 fingers in a lazy little salute. I shut the door and sat with Mom until her hands stopped shaking. At dawn, I drove to the county recorder before the line formed. The room was quiet and smelled like toner. I asked for a copy of the deed that gave Liam caretaker control. The clerk behind the glass slid a printout to me. I checked the stamp and the date. Sunday. I stared at it. "You're closed on Sundays," I said. She nodded. "We are," she said, "but the notary stamp says Sunday." The stamp number was clear. I typed it into the state website at a kiosk. The license came back retired. The little green box on the screen said it like a bell. Retired, not active, not allowed to notarize anything. I took a photo of the screen with my phone and printed the page with the county office hours. I put both beside the deed copy and took one more photo. Receipts. I drove to the hospital next. The hallways were white and full of echoes. I told the records desk I was the son and executor and showed the death certificate I had picked up after the funeral. The clerk was kind. She looked sad when she said Dad's name. She printed the medication log for the day the deed claimed he signed. It showed a fentanyl drip at the exact time. She slid it across the desk. "I'm sorry," she said. "He wouldn't have been able to sign anything then." I thanked her and stepped aside. My phone buzzed. A text from Liam. "Stop this." I put the phone face down. I looked over the log again and again, letting the truth settle deep. I took a photo of the chart with the timestamp. The air felt cleaner. I wanted to shout, but I didn't. "Let's see where Dad actually was at that time," I said under my breath. Then I asked about the ICU access logs. The ICU clerk checked a second screen and then called a nurse. The nurse came with tired eyes and a badge on a retractable cord. "We log every door," she said, tapping keys. "Visitors scan in. Staff badges ping." She frowned, then turned the screen toward me. There it was, A badge ping in the ICU corridor near Dad's room at the same time as the supposed signing. The name on the log belonged to a respiratory tech, but the notes field had a short line. Visitor with blue pickup moved patient to garage ramp. I felt a cold line climb my back. Garage ramp? I asked. We don't let patients go that way, she said. But sometimes families break rules when they're upset. She looked at me kindly. I'm sorry for your loss. I thanked her and asked if the parking garage had cameras. She pointed me to security. At security, a man with gray hair and a coffee stain on his polo leaned closer when I said the time, the ramp, and blue pickup. He scrolled through a timeline until a small figure on a screen became clear. A gurney rolled to the edge of the garage. A man in a blue F-150 stood with his hands on his hips. Another man in a neat shirt lifted a clipboard. They framed my father like a task to finish. The license plate was visible for a second. I knew that plate. Uncle Ron's truck. I asked for a still. The guard printed it and masked the last 3 digits for policy. I took the print, my hands steady. The second man, the one with the clipboard, looked familiar too. A notary's assistant, I realized, from a bank booth downtown. I had seen him stamp forms before. As I walked out, I texted one word to myself, like a note, F-150. Then I called Mom and told her I'd be home soon. Pull the garage cams, I said to my own recording. We did. Back at the vineyard, the sky was clear and bright. The chain on the gate glittered in the sun. Uncle Ron's blue F-150 sat near the tasting room like a dog guarding a bone. He stood by it with his hand on the hood. Liam leaned on the porch rail, acting bored, but his foot tapped fast. I held up the masked still from the hospital garage. This yours? I asked Ron. He squinted at the picture and laughed. Lots of blue trucks, he said. I turned the print so the date and time showed. This is the hospital ramp, I said. This is the same hour Dad was on a drip. This is you and a notary's assistant. Ron's smile slid thin. Family peace talk, he said, waving a hand toward the tasting room. Come on. No need to make a scene. Inside, the long table was set like a meeting, not a meal. A retired judge from town sat at the head. He smiled like a person in a brochure. The club manager from the country club perched on a chair, pretending to be part of family. 2 men I didn't know whispered near the back. We're here to bless a plan, the judge said. Liam will act as steward. It's best for continuity. Peace talks with cash envelopes aren't peace, I said, because I had already seen the brown envelopes under the table edge. The club manager's eyes flicked toward them, then away. Uncle Ron took a seat and crossed his legs. It's time to be reasonable, he said. I placed my phone on the table where everyone could see it. The red record light blinked. Everyone okay being recorded? I asked. The judge cleared his throat. This is a private family meeting, he said. Then the recording protects us all, I said. No surprises. The club manager swallowed. The judge nodded slow. If it helps you, he said. I pressed the button and spoke for the record. Operation Harvest Back, Phase 2 begins. At first the room was polite. The judge talked about heritage and leadership. Liam sat taller with each word. Uncle Ron leaned back and smiled at the ceiling. I kept my eyes on my phone, the little moving line that showed audio. If they were proud of it, they would say it on tape. I asked simple questions. Who hired the notary? Silence. Why was the deed stamped on a Sunday? The judge blinked and shuffled papers. The club manager's knee bounced under the table. This is not a court, the judge said. It's a family. A junior club member, the one who had been pouring water and trying to be invisible, finally spoke without thinking. Ron handled appreciation, he said, and then froze. The word hung there. Appreciation. A nice word for cash. Uncle Ron smiled like a teacher who had heard a funny wrong answer. It's just how things are done, he said. We say thank you. We move on. I turned the phone so the red light faced them all. We said we were recording, I reminded them. The judge frowned. Maybe we should stop the recording, he said. I nodded. We can do better, I said. I pulled out a small action camera, clicked it on, and set it by the picture, where everyone could see it lived. Visible camera. Fresh consent, I said. The judge sighed and nodded. Fine, he said. Let's proceed. I kept my tone calm. This isn't culture, I said. It's paperwork. So let's chase the buyer. I slid a paper across the table with a name I had pulled that morning from a filing. North Star AG LLC, Delaware. Who are they? I asked. Uncle Ron shrugged. Future, he said. They drink wine with money. I smiled a little. The buyer didn't drink wine, I said. It laundered it. I spent the afternoon at a coffee shop with good Wi-Fi and a plug near my chair. I pulled up the Delaware registry and searched North Star AG. The registered agent address matched an address used by 3 other shell companies in the last year. One was Pioneer Run Holdings. Another held a short lease on a warehouse near the river. I drew a little map in my notebook with arrows. North Star to Pioneer Run to a local bank we knew well. I ran the names through a data broker and found a proxy manager who had opened and closed small companies for fees. He had a car registered to a street near Uncle Ron's house. I kept going. I looked at the bank filings, pulled public records, and printed a neat ownership flow chart. Then I found a small thing that made me sit up. An email list for a celebration feature at a local food and wine site. Marina, my ex, had pitched a story about a new investor saving a struggling vineyard. Her editor had CC'd a producer and the club manager. I stared at her name. We had not spoken for a year. It hurt to see it on the screen next to a plan to erase me. I took a breath and saved the email thread as a PDF. Then I called the bookkeeper from Dad's office. He answered on the second ring and sounded tired. "Noah," he said, "come by tonight." Before I left, I looked at the note Dad had written in the binder I found in his office. Harvest Scholarship Trust, HST. He had wanted scholarships for the workers' kids and a clinic day at Harvest. In the margin he had scribbled, "Caleb signs with Noah. If Ron stirs, call Amelia Hands." I didn't know who Caleb was, but I knew Hands had to be Harrington and Sloan, a law firm in Portland Dad mentioned once. I packed my bag and stood. Dad hated shells, I told myself. He left us something instead. I drove to the bookkeeper's small apartment and knocked. The bookkeeper's place smelled like coffee and old printer ink. He lived alone. Piles of folders sat on a table by the window. He motioned me in and closed the door. "I don't want trouble," he said. "I just want the truth known." He pulled a folder marked with last month's date and placed it between us. Inside were screenshots of Zelle and Venmo payments to a notary assistant on the day before and the day of the supposed signing. Small amounts, then one larger one. Memo lines said errand, delivery, and service. He also slid me a thin sheet from the seller, a barrel tag manifest from the week Dad collapsed. On one line, a swap was recorded between Lot 9 and Lot 13. The initials next to it were CM, Cole, my best friend since high school and our seller Hand. My mouth went dry. "He wouldn't," I said, but the page didn't care what I believed. "I wasn't sure what it meant," the bookkeeper said, "but the timing is odd, yes?" He looked at the floor.
"Noah, I didn't know who to tell."
I took photos of the payments and the manifest and sent them to my own secure email. Then I asked a question I didn't want to ask. Did Dad know? The bookkeeper shook his head. "He was in the hospital by then," he said. "He didn't taste the last rack." I thanked him and stood. He put a hand on the folder. "There's one more thing," he said. "A delivery slip. Your mother signed for a courier the week before your father passed. From Harrington and Sloan." He found the slip and handed it to me. Mom's neat name sat at the bottom, signed with a little flourish I knew from birthday cards. The tracking number was printed in blue. I drove home with my head buzzing. Money leaves fingerprints on glass. That was clear now. But something else was calling me. Box 117th might hold more than paper. I set an alarm for opening time, placed the key on my desk, and watched the lane until the sky went black. The bank lobby was quiet and soft with carpet. A woman with a calm voice led me to the vault after I showed ID and Dad's death certificate. Box and 117 slid out smooth and heavy. In a small room with a table and a lamp, I lifted the lid. Inside sat an old USB drive wrapped in a handkerchief, a handwritten letter, and a tiny brass key with H and S stamped on a tag. I opened the letter first. Dad's handwriting tilted to the right, neat and steady. "Noah," it began. "If you have this, I am sorry. Storms came. This is what you need. Call Harrington and Sloan. If barrels taste green, check Lot 9. If Ron stirs, keep your temper and keep your notes. Love, Dad." I touched the paper and closed my eyes for a second. I plugged the USB into the bank's little computer with the help of the staff. The clerk stood with me, eyes turned away in respect as his voice filled the small room. "Son," Dad said, the sound a little tinny but clear, "I hope we never use this. But if we do, build the trust. Don't fight with fists, fight with paper." I wrapped the USB again and put it in my pocket. I took a photo of the H and S key on my palm. The brass felt warm. I checked the clock. I could make it to Harrington and Sloan before lunch if I drove fast and didn't stop. I signed the vault log, thanked the clerk, and walked out into the light. The air tasted like rain, even though the sky was blue. On the way to the car, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, "Leave the past alone." I took a screenshot and saved the number. As I pulled onto the road, I said the name out loud in the car. Harrington and Sloan, I told myself. Phase 3. Harrington and Sloan's office in Portland felt like old books and new glass. A receptionist checked the docket and frowned. The partner who handled your father's file passed away last month, she said. I'm so sorry. My chest pulled tight. Even the helpers in Dad's story were gone. Is there a way to access the e-files? I asked. I'm the executor. We have a trust to confirm. A paralegal named Amelia came to the lobby with quick steps and kind eyes. She shook my hand and led me to a small conference room. We keep two-factor on client vaults, she said. When a partner dies, we move access through probate court or with proof of successor counsel. She studied the H and S key I placed on the table. This was our old off-site storage key, she said, a little amused and a little sad. Your dad liked things done right. I gave her the courier slip Mom had signed. She typed the tracking number into a carrier site. The screen showed the date and our farm address and a little green delivered checkmark from the week before Dad died. We sent something to your mother, she said. Likely the final signed deed for the Harvest Scholarship Trust. My heart knocked. If the trust is signed, I said, we can stop this. Amelia nodded. If we can show it, she said. We'll still need to line up the pieces. The Sunday notary, the hospital logs, the shell companies. But a signed trust deed is strong. She looked at me a moment longer. Your father was thorough, she said. He left you a path. I left the office with a copy of the probate docket number, a list of documents to collect, and a new courage in my chest. On the drive home, I called Mom. She picked up on the second ring and sounded like she had been crying. Sweetheart, she said, there's something you should see. Check the sewing table's false bottom. Mom's sewing table sat by the window where she did hems and fixed buttons. I pulled the drawer and felt the light drag at the back where the wood should end. I pressed my fingers under the edge until the false bottom lifted like a thin door. Inside were 2 envelopes tied with a blue ribbon. My hands shook a little as I slid the first one open. At the top, in clear type, it said Harvest Scholarship Trust. Below, in black ink, were 2 names. Noah Whitaker, co-trustee, and Caleb Whitaker, co-trustee. There were witness lines, a notary seal from months before, and Harrington and Sloan printed in the footer. I took a photo of the header and the co-trustee line. The paper smelled like dust and lemon oil from the drawer. The second envelope held something colder. It was a non-disclosure agreement with Marina's name on it and a copy of a $20,000 check from a shell company linked to Ron. The memo line said consulting. It felt like a slap. I stared at her signature. I remembered the way she used to hold her pen when she wrote tasting notes. In the barrel room, saying our Pinot smelled like cherries and wet stone, I put both documents on the table and called Amelia on speaker. I have the signed trust deed, I said, trying to keep my voice even. It names me and a man named Caleb as co-trustees. Amelia asked for photos. I sent them. She whistled soft in my ear. That's strong, she said. It shows your father's intent and timing. I sent the NDA in check copy too. Amelia's voice went tight. That shows motive, she said. It explains the friendly media. Mom touched my arm. Who is Caleb? She asked. I looked at the deed again. The ink did not answer. Dad had chosen a second co-trustee and never told us who he was. We'll find him, I said. I slid the papers back into sleeves, took scans with my phone, and locked the originals in our safe. As I turned the dial, my phone buzzed with a new text from Liam. You're ruining everything. I put the phone face down. Who is Caleb to Dad? I asked the empty room. And why hide him? I found Caleb with 3 searches and a leap that felt like stepping off a cliff. A birth record from Montana, a photo from a small-town paper, and a public address that matched a quiet street in Bozeman. I sent a short, careful email. My name is Noah. My father was Daniel Whitaker. Are you Caleb? He replied in 10 minutes. Yes. I'm sorry for your loss. We set up a video call that afternoon. When his face came on the screen, I saw Dad's eyes. Caleb was older by 6 years, with a calm way of sitting. He said he grew up with his mother, that Dad had been in his life in private ways, not public ones. They wrote letters. They met for fishing trips when they could. He didn't want to hurt your mother, Caleb said. He also didn't want to lie. It was complicated. He said Dad told him about the Harvest Scholarship Trust last winter. He wanted workers' kids to have a shot, Caleb said. He said you would run it well. My throat hurt. He named you co-trustee, I said. He trusted both of us. Caleb nodded. His voice softened. He told me if anything felt off at the vineyard, I should back you. He went quiet, then added. He also thought Liam was in trouble. He worried Liam might do something foolish. He wrote me an email about a week before the hospital. He said, "If the wine tastes wrong, pull lab reports." Caleb forwarded the email while we talked. I opened it and read Dad's lines. Short. Direct. "If it tastes off, pull lab reports." I told Caleb about the barrel manifest with Cole's initials, the Zelle payments, the Sunday notary, the blue F-150, and Marina's NDA. He shook his head. "You need proof, not just patterns," he said. "Get the lab to test Lot 9 and Lot 13. Get security footage for the swap." I agreed. "Will you stand with me when this goes public?" I asked. Caleb didn't blink. "I'll fly down if you need me," he said. "But you already have what you need. You have the truth." When the call ended, I sat still for a long time. Then I stood up. "Test the barrels," I said. Now, the lab sat on the edge of town in a low building that smelled faintly like citrus cleaner and steel. I brought sealed samples from Lot 9 and Lot 13, taken with the bookkeeper watching and the chain of custody form signed. The tech labeled each bottle and said results would take a day. I didn't want to wait without moving, so I drove to the storage room and pulled last month's camera feed from the ceiling unit above the barrel row. I scrubbed through time until the timestamp matched the manifest line. There he was. Cole, my friend. He walked in with a dolly, checked the tags, then switched 2 small plaques between barrels. He looked over his shoulder twice, then left. I paused the frame and took a still. I felt like my chest was collapsing. My phone buzzed. The lab sent an early note. Preliminary numbers showed a sulfur spike in Lot 9, and signs of dilution not present in earlier polls. Science does not lie, even when family does. I asked the tech to rush the cert. He said he would. I walked outside and stood with my hands on my knees. The gravel crunched under my shoes. Cole had been with us for 10 years. He was the one who helped me rack at midnight and laughed when the corks popped. I called him. He didn't answer. I texted, "We need to talk." He replied, "Busy." I sent the still photo of him switching tags. He didn't write back for a while. When he did, he said, "It's not what it looks like." 10 minutes later, a Venmo screenshot came from the bookkeeper with a line I had missed, a payment from Liam to Cole the week of the swap. The memo said truck parts. I saved it and sent it to my secure folder. Then I drove to the courthouse and picked up the forms I would need to stop. Any sale, lis pendens, and a request for a temporary restraining order. I filled them out at a wooden table under a flickering light. My hand didn't shake. I attached the deed copy, the Sunday stamp page, the ICU log, the CCTV still, the flowchart draft, the lab's preliminary numbers, and a sworn statement. I slid the packet under the glass to the clerk. She stamped the first page with a heavy sound. "Do you need copies?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "A lot." I stepped back into the afternoon. Freeze the field, I told myself. Do not touch. By noon the next day, the lis pendens and tro were stamped and recorded. The land, the buildings, the equipment, frozen. I filed a complaint with the State Enology Board over product adulteration and attached the lab's final certificates when they arrived that afternoon. The numbers were clean and cruel. Sulfur spike beyond normal range, simple dilution. Markers indicating water or low-grade bulk wine added to our barrels. The report sat heavy in my hand like a rock. I scanned it and sent it to Amelia, to the case file, and to my private folder called Phase Files. When I walked back to the truck, Ron leaned on the tailgate of his blue F-150 as if he had been waiting for a bus. He looked down at his nails and said in a light voice, "Too late, deal's already closed." My stomach dropped for a second, but then I breathed and checked the recorder in my pocket. "Name the buyer to my face," I said. Ron smiled without teeth. "Don't worry about it," he said. "Adults are talking." He pushed off the truck and strolled away like a man in a movie. I called the county recorder again and asked if any deed had been accepted after my lis pendens. "No," the clerk said. "Anything filed now is flagged." I thanked her and hung up. Liam texted me a single word, "Stop." I didn't answer. I drove to the coffee shop with the good Wi-Fi and pulled up corporate records again. If Ron wanted to play games with names, I would draw the map in ink. I checked North Star AG and every new filing with the same registered agent. One popped 2 weeks ago, Pioneer Run Holdings LLC. Same agent, same address. A different logo, slick and safe. I searched the local food site again and found a draft post scheduled for tomorrow. A celebration dinner with the new investors at Whitaker Vineyard. Written by a producer I knew and pitched by Marina. I sat back and laughed once without humor. If they wanted a celebration, we would give them a show. I sent a short email to the producer, confirm attendance. I'll be there. Then I texted a journalist I trusted from the city. Want a story? Mic up dinner. I walked into the boutique hotel lobby with a calm face and a wire in my pocket. The dining room had low lights, soft music, and white napkins folded like sails. Liam wore a new jacket and tried to smile. Ron wore confidence like cologne. Marina stood near the bar with a notepad she didn't need, and a look I used to fall for. The producer moved around checking angles. I shook hands and sat down. I made sure the small camera on the shelf saw the table. I placed my phone by my water glass with the screen dark and the mic on. The journalist I invited slid in late with a press badge turned backward and an easy grin. We ordered. Ron raised a glass. To family and the future, he said. I raised mine and said, to clear records. The producer smiled like we were charming. When plates landed, I said it the way I had practiced in the truck. So who owns Pioneer Run? Forks paused. Liam looked at Ron. Ron said, friends. The journalist leaned forward. We like names, he said, friendly and sharp. The producer blinked. Marina's eyes flicked to me, then to the camera, then to Ron. I tapped my phone, and a small Bluetooth speaker in my pocket clicked. The ownership flowchart appeared on the TV above the bar as if the restaurant had planned it. Lines and boxes. North Star AG to Pioneer. Run to an agent to a trust to a P.O. box 2 blocks from Ron's house. The journalist lifted a hand toward the screen like a teacher. Neat, he said. Clean. I didn't look away from Ron. I kept my voice soft. Also neat, I said, and I played the lab certificate and a still from the barrel cam. Cole switching tags numbers in black and white. Liam's face crumpled. Ron stood up fast enough to push his chair into a server. He put a hand up toward the camera, like he could stop the light. Someone gasped. He shoved at the journalist's mic. The producer didn't cut. The clip would loop all night. Liam whispered. I'm sorry, but I couldn't hear the rest over the rush in my ears. I kept my hands flat on the table. He raised a toast, I said to myself. I raised the receipts. I looked at Marina. She couldn't meet my eyes. I stood and left my napkin on my plate. We're not done, I said to the room. I meant it. By morning, the clip of Ron pushing the mic had bounced across local feeds. The caption on most reposts said investor loses his cool. Comments asked who the investor was, why he hated questions, and why a wine story needed a bodyguard. I did not post a thing. I went to City Hall instead. I asked for public records on code variances for a warehouse Ron had talked up for months. The clerk slid a file under the glass. A variance had been approved fast. A debt payoff on a personal account linked to the mayor's campaign treasurer sat one day before the approval. Dates do not lie. I photographed everything and sent the bundle to the journalist who had been at dinner. He wrote back one word. Wow. Then he asked for an on-camera statement with me and the mayor later that day. At the country club, a different kind of record moved. A board email, forwarded by a friend who hated bullies, showed a vote to expel Ron for conduct not in keeping with club values. The line made me snort, but I saved the screenshot. I drove back to the vineyard and walked into the barrel room. The air was cool and smelled like oak and fruit, and the faint metallic tang of steel. I set up a folding table and taped a big paper timeline to the wall. ICU log, Sunday notary stamp, blue F150 still, North Star, and Pioneer Run filings, variance dates, lab cert, barrel cam. I put a title at the top with a marker, how they tried to take it. Mom stood at the door with her arms folded. This helps me breathe, she said. It helps me see. I nodded. It helps me stay quiet, I said. Quiet, but not still. I sent Liam a message. Come tonight. Bring Cole. Bring Ron if he dares. He wrote back after a long pause. I'll come. Cole too. He didn't mention Ron. I turned off the lights and left the room ready. Tomorrow would be the courthouse steps. Today would be our family's reckoning under the barrel lights. They came at dusk, when the sun made the vines glow and the dust on the lane looked like smoke. Liam walked in first, pale and younger than yesterday. Cole followed, eyes on the floor. Mom stood near the back, her hands wrapped around a mug she didn't drink. I pointed to the paper on the wall. We're going to walk this, I said, and I hit record on the camera with a red light nobody could miss. We agreed to record, I said. Liam nodded. His voice was thin. Okay. I traced the line with my finger and kept my tone calm. ICU log, Sunday notary, retired stamp, blue F150 at the hospital garage, North Star to Pioneer Run, variance before approval, lab cert, barrel cam. Each piece landed like a drum. I didn't look for tears or excuses. I looked for truth. When I reached the last photo, the still of Cole switching tags, I paused the camera and looked at him. Do you want to say anything? I asked. Cole swallowed. He pulled a phone from his pocket and set it on the table. Play it, he said. The screen showed his face from his own kitchen that afternoon. Noah, he said on the video, his voice cracking. I'm sorry. Liam paid me to swap the tags. He said it was to fix a mistake. I knew it wasn't. I was weak. I'll tell anyone who asks. He had recorded consent to use the video in any proceeding. I pressed stop and looked at Liam. He wiped his face with his sleeve. I can't do this, he whispered. You already did, I said, my voice steady. My phone buzzed. A man in a suit stepped into the doorway with hard shoes that clicked against the floor. Mr. Whitaker, he said, holding a folder. You've been served. He handed me an injunction and a signed power of attorney with Dad's name on it. The signature looked like Dad's, but my stomach said no. Ron's attorney smiled without his eyes. See you in court, he said, and left. I laid the paper next to the timeline under the lab cert and above the notary stamp. I clicked the camera back on. We'll answer with paper, I said. We always do. When the sun set, I met the mayor on the courthouse steps with cameras aimed up from the sidewalk. He looked smaller without his office. The journalist asked him about the variance and the debt payoff date. The mayor cleared his throat and read from a printed statement. He retracted the support for any building tied to Pioneer Run or North Star until a full review. He said he welcomed an ethics look at his own office. He nodded toward me, not friendly, not cruel. We should have caught this, he said. Inside the recorder's window, a clerk posted a notice that the deed attached to our parcel was flagged for fraud risk. The paper gleamed under the glass. A second email hit my phone from the state notary board. We have opened an investigation into the stamp used on the Whitaker deed. I forwarded it to Amelia. Then in another ping, the wine festival that had handed Ron a ribbon for a special release last year posted on their feed that they were voiding the award tied to the tainted vintage. The comments were a snake pit. I put my phone in my pocket and looked at the town. The clock on the courthouse tower read 5. People still moved in and out with real problems that had nothing to do with my life. It helped to see that. After the cameras were packed, I drove to the old storage barn at the back of the property. Dad used to sit there with a radio and a thermos and watch the rain roll across the hills. I walked the rows of empty barrels with a flashlight. Dust moved in the beam like slow snow. In the third row from the door, under a tarp, I saw a barrel with a chalk mark I didn't recognize. I pulled the tarp and found a sealed tube wedged in the bunghole, capped and waxed. Inside was a letter in Dad's hand and a second sheet. The letter said, "No POA without Noah plus Caleb present." The second sheet was a clean, unsigned power of attorney with a blank signature line. I held it next to the copy Ron's lawyer had served and could see, even with my small light, how the strokes on their version looked printed, not pressed by a pen. I set the pages down like they were fragile bones. In an empty barrel, I said to the dark, the letter Ron prayed didn't exist. I took photos and slid the tube into my backpack. Tomorrow the judge would set a hearing. Tonight I would sleep with the truth under my roof. The next morning, Amelia set up a short call with a forensic document expert she trusted. I sent scans of the clean, unsigned POA from the barrel and the signed one served by Ron's lawyer. The expert highlighted tiny bands that run through printed lines when a cheap printer starts to die. He pointed at the signature on Ron's copy and said, "That is a reproduction of a signature pasted on a page and printed. The pen pressure is flat. There are no natural starts or lifts." He promised a full report with photos. I printed 3 copies of his email and tucked them behind the court summons. At noon, Liam texted, "Can we talk?" I told him to meet me on the roof of the old tasting room, where Dad and I used, to watch thunderstorms and count seconds between lightning and thunder. He came up the narrow stairs looking like he hadn't slept. He stood with his hands in his pockets and stared at the hills. "I messed up," he said. The words fell out like a pocket full of nails. He told me about the poker games that turned mean, the loan that turned into a hand on his shoulder, the way Ron said he could fix anything if Liam just did what he was told. "He said I'd be the heir," Liam said. "He said you'd be fine, you always are." He pulled a small phone from his jacket. "This is Ron's," he said. He used it to text the notary assistant in Marina. I took it when he set it down at the club. He swallowed hard. "I'm tired, Noah." I turned the phone over and saw the cheap plastic case in a crack across the corner. I powered it up and found threads with names saved as initials. The messages were not hard to read. "Send the draft. Sunday works. Pay the judge's friend. Make sure the critic writes soft." I took photos of the screen and then put the phone in a bag with a label and the time. I looked at my brother. He looked 10 again. "You're going to tell the truth," I said. He nodded. On record, he said, and surprised me. I put my hand on the rail. The wood was warm in the sun. Time to pull the barrel with Dad's real power of attorney, I said, and show them what paper can do. The judge set an evidentiary hearing for 48 hours later and told both sides to bring everything. On the courthouse steps after the scheduling, the mayor stood at a small podium and read a new statement with me at his side and the journalist filming. He said the city would review all variances tied to Pioneer Run and North Star. He said public trust mattered more than speed. Behind us, the recorder's office posted a larger notice about the flagged deed. A clerk taped it with extra care. The state notary board sent a second email, short and sharp, the retired notary stamp was out of circulation and any use was a violation. I forwarded it to Ron's lawyer and copied the court. At the same time, the wine festival posted a video. A volunteer in a polo held up the ribbon they had given to the tainted vintage and said they were taking it back. He placed it in a box and closed the lid. The caption read, "We do not reward fraud." The country club sent a follow-up email to members. Ron's name had been removed from the donor wall. A photo showed a blank space where his brass plate had been, the glue still shiny. I didn't smile, but some tight place in me loosened. At home, Mom made sandwiches and lined up folders on the dining table like stepping stones. ICU log, Sunday notary with, office hours, parking garage still, shell company flowchart, variance dates and payoff, lab certificates, barrel cam, Cole's video apology, Liam's statement draft, signed Harvest Scholarship Trust deed, Dad's barrel letter, clean unsigned, POA, forensic notes on banding and pen pressure, texts from Ron's burner about Marina and the notary assistant. I added receipts for each, photos, scans, timestamps. We loaded copies into 2 boxes. Caleb texted that he was flying in and would be there for the hearing. I felt steadier knowing he was in the air, coming toward us like a promise Dad made and kept across time. As the sun dropped, I walked to the barrel room and looked at the timeline one more time. We didn't whisper, I said to the rows of wood. We invited cameras. My phone buzzed with the court's notice of hearing time, 9 a.m., 2 days from now. Ron filed another motion at the last minute. The judge did not delay. I turned off the light and locked the door. The paper would speak next. I met Liam at Amelia's small conference room because I wanted a clean table, a clock on the wall, and a camera no one could miss. He sat across from me with his hands folded like a kid in the principal's office. Amelia placed a simple audio recorder between us and said the date and time. "Liam," I said, and my voice sounded even in my ears, "do you agree to be recorded?" He nodded. "Yes." I asked him to tell the story from the start. He spoke in short, honest lines. Poker losses, a loan that turned into orders, Ron's words about fixing things and making him the heir. He described the day he handed Cole cash for the barrel swap, and how he told himself it was to fix a mistake, not make one. He slid the cheap burner phone across the table again, but this time he added the unlock code and a typed statement granting consent to search. We bagged it and initialed the seal for chain of custody. We scrolled the text together, Ron to the notary assistant with the Sunday plan, Ron to Marina about soft coverage, the assistant to Ron about wheelchair to garage, a photo of a stamp pad on a kitchen table. I took screenshots of each thread, saved them to an evidence folder, and printed 2 sets. Liam cried once. He did not ask me to forgive him. He asked me to make it stop. I told him I could not stop the truth, but I could make sure it worked the way Dad taught us. "Receipts over rage," I said. He wiped his face and nodded. We signed his sworn affidavit and added it to the stack between the lab cert and the ICU log. When we stood, he looked lighter and older at the same time. On my way out, I told Amelia we would file the burner and the affidavit with the court by sunset. "Do it fast," she said. "Speed matters now." I put my palm on the door and felt the grain. "Time to pull the barrel with Dad's real power of attorney," I said, "and do it in front of everyone." We did not hide. We walked up the courthouse steps with boxes in our arms and cameras at our backs. The mayor stood at a small podium again, but this time he did not try to control the wind. He said the city would suspend every variance tied to Pioneer Run and North Star until hearings could be held in public. He said he would turn over emails and texts for review. He looked at me and said, "No one owns a town more than its people." Inside, the recorder's office posted a larger red notice flagging our parcel as at risk for deed fraud. A clerk taped it with steady hands while a line of neighbors read it like a poem. The state notary board emailed an update to all parties. The retired stamp on our deed was illegal to use. The assistant was now under investigation. Any document bearing that number would be treated as suspect. The wine festival posted a short video of their board chair boxing last year's ribbon tied to the tainted vintage. "We made an error," she said. "We fix errors." At the country club, someone sent me a photo of the donor wall with a pale rectangle where Ron's name used to sit. Glue marks looked like a bandage that did not stick. Across the street, the journalist from dinner clipped a mic to my shirt and asked one question for live radio. "What do you want today?" I kept it simple. "For paper to speak," I said. "And for people to hear it." The judge set the evidentiary hearing for 9 the next morning. No delays. Ron came late with his lawyer and waved a glossy folder like a fan. He smiled too wide and said, "See you in there." I did not answer him. I walked down the steps with Mom on my arm and Liam, one step behind us like a shadow that had decided to follow the sun. Caleb texted from the airport, landed. "See you at dawn." I looked at the clock on the tower, felt the boxes in my hands, and thought about Dad at the sewing table. The day stretched thin and tight. Tomorrow the tightness would snap. Tonight, we would sleep. In the morning, the record would stand. At dawn, I unlocked the old barn and took the sealed tube from the marked barrel, the one where I had found Dad's letter and the clean, unsigned power of attorney. I packed them in a clear bag with a label and carried that bag in the top of the box like a lantern. In court, the judge asked both sides to lay out exhibits in order. Ron's lawyer went first with a stack of glossy photos and the signed POA. He spoke loud and smiled at the jury box even though there was no jury. When it was my turn, I stood with Amelia and set down our chain like laying track, ICU, medlog with the fentanyl drip timestamp, Sunday notary record with office hours and the retired license status, parking garage still showing the blue F-100 and 50, and the notary assistant, ownership flowchart from North Star to Pioneer Run 2, Ron's P.O. box, city variants and the debt payoff dates, lab certificates showing sulfur, spike in dilution, the barrel cam still of Cole switching tags, Cole's apology video, transcript, Liam's sworn affidavit, burner phone transcripts and photos, the signed Harvest Scholarship Trust deed naming me and Caleb, and finally the barrel tube. I opened it gently and placed Dad's note on the overhead projector so everyone could read his handwriting. No POA without Noah plus Caleb present. Then I held up the clean, unsigned power of attorney and the copy Ron had served me. Even from 10 feet, anyone could see the difference in ink and line. The judge nodded once and said, "Mark them both." The courtroom smelled like paper and old wood, and a little like rain from coats by the door. Caleb sat in the second row with his hands folded, steady as a fence post. Mom squeezed my arm. Ron crossed his legs and stared at the ceiling. His lawyer shuffled and pretended to be bored. The judge looked at us over his glasses. "We will hear from the expert next," he said. I placed the clean POA on a velvet pad like it was a relic from a church. "See you in court," I had said to Ron. Now court saw us. The forensic document expert wore a plain suit and spoke like a teacher. He put both POAs on a large screen with a split view and showed the room what I had felt with my hands. "This signature," he said, tapping Ron's copy, "has no pen pressure variation. It is a reproduction of a genuine signature placed onto a false document with a printer. Note the faint horizontal bands here and here. That is printer banding. Note the lack of natural tremors at line starts. This is not how a human signs." He circled tiny places where ink should have pooled and did not. He talked about strokes, lifts, and speed. Then he played the hospital access log video frame and matched the time to the fentanyl chart. "This patient could not have signed at this time even if presented with a document," he said. He traced the shell company flowchart and explained beneficial ownership in short words. The judge asked clear questions. The answers stayed inside the lines. The lab director went next. He explained sulfur spikes and why honest wine does not show simple dilution markers. He kept it short. "Someone watered it," he said, "or blended with bulk." The room made a low noise. Cole's video apology and Liam's affidavit were entered without drama. The state notary board email was marked and stapled beside the retired license record. Amelia handed up the signed Harvest Scholarship Trust deed and set its date. The judge looked at it for a long time. Then he leaned back and folded his hands. My lawyer stood and did what Dad would have asked. "Your Honor," she said, "we seek maximum penalties for fraud, a public apology to correct the record, and restitution to the Harvest Scholarship Trust equal to all funds moved through Pioneer Run and North Star in connection with this vineyard." She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Ron's lawyer stood and tried to scatter dust. He talked about confusion, about family, about grief. The judge waited for him to finish. Then the judge looked at us and said, "I will issue findings shortly." He paused. I will also invite proposals for restorative steps after penalties are set." The room held its breath. Paper had spoken. The order came that afternoon like a clear bell. The judge found that the caretaker deed and the power of attorney presented by Ron's side were fraudulent. He voided any related transfers, flagged the parcel for special handling, referred the notary assistant to the state board and the county prosecutor, and fined Ron heavily. He ordered restitution equal to all money moved through Pioneer Run and North Star in connection with our land. He directed that restitution be paid to the Harvest Scholarship Trust named in Dad's signed deed, not to me, not to Liam, not to any private pocket. We met with the clerk and watched the first wire transfer arrive on a monitor behind the counter. Numbers rolled in like a tide and then settled. I took a screenshot with the clerk's permission and sent it to Mom, to Caleb, to Amelia, to the bookkeeper. The club sent another photo of the donor wall with a new plate that read Community Scholarship Fund. The wine festival posted a short clip of our field hands smiling with their kids. The caption said, "Harvest should lift everyone." I found Liam on the porch at dusk. The vines were dark lines against a pink sky. He stared at the road and rubbed his hands together like they were cold. "It's over," he said. "The fraud is," I said. "The work isn't." I told him what I would offer now that the money was safe and the record was clean. A monitored compliance and safety job, training, therapy, a debt program, zero equity, random, audits, and garnished wages with a portion sent each month as a stipend for his son. "Not from the trust," I said. "From you." He nodded and cried a little without looking away from the road. "I'll take it," he said. We walked the rows together in the last light. I touched a post and thought of Dad's hands on the same wood. Caleb joined us with coffee and a quiet smile. Mom stood in the kitchen doorway with the porch light on. I typed a short note on my phone for the video I would post at midnight. I looked at the hills and the house and the faces I loved. Thank you for listening to my story, but prison, payment, or public shame? What feels like justice to you? I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'll be in the comment section.